Serial killers. Just hearing those words is enough to stir up a mix of fear and fascination. These are people who, behind a mask of normalcy, committed such brutal crimes that they left an indelible mark on history. Today, we're diving into the lives of the 5 most infamous serial killers in history. Trust me, their stories are so unsettling that you'll find yourself questioning just how far human evil can go. Stick around until the end, because the last one on this list defines true horror. 1. Ted Bundy, the charismatic monster. Ted Bundy wasn't your typical scary-looking killer. In fact, he was known for his charm and good looks, traits he skillfully used to lure in his victims. Bundy was active primarily in the 1970s and confessed to killing over 30 women, though the true number could be much higher. What made Bundy so dangerous was his ability to manipulate. He often pretended to be injured or in need of help to gain the trust of his victims. Once they approached, he would brutally attack them. Bundy would strike his victims on the head to incapacitate them before committing acts of rape and murder. Most of his victims were young college women, and many of their bodies were found mutilated. One of the most terrifying moments in his story was his prison escape in 1977. Bundy leapt from a courthouse window and remained on the run for weeks, enough time to kill again. After being recaptured, he escaped once more from a Colorado prison, and during the second break, he murdered several college students in Florida. His spree finally ended after a violent confrontation with police. Bundy was sentenced to death in 1989, but even in his final days, he remained manipulative, only confessing details of his crimes in an attempt to delay his execution. His charm and his ability to present himself as a trustworthy person are what make his stories so chilling. The coldness with which he committed his crimes while maintaining a facade of normalcy is what makes Ted Bundy one of the most notorious and feared serial killers in history. 2. Jeffrey Dahmer, the Milwaukee cannibal. Jeffrey Dahmer is a name that instantly conjures thoughts of pure horror. Between 1978 and 1991, Dahmer murdered 17 young men, and what sets his crimes apart is the way he treated his victims' bodies. Dahmer didn't just kill, he dismembered, kept body parts as trophies, and even engaged in cannibalism. Dahmer grew up in what seemed like a normal household, but from a young age, he showed disturbing signs, like a fascination with anatomy and death. His early murders were impulsive, but over time, he developed a methodical pattern. Dahmer would lure his victims, often marginalized young men, by offering money or companionship. Once they were in his apartment, he drugged, strangled, and dismembered them. Dahmer's crimes were discovered when one of his would-be victims escaped and called the police. Inside Dahmer's apartment, officers found a true horror scene. Photographs of dismembered bodies, human parts stored in the refrigerator, and even barrels containing decomposing remains. The calmness with which Dahmer described his crimes, along with his lack of remorse, made him one of the most feared figures in criminal history. During his trial, Dahmer confessed to all of his murders in disturbing detail. He claimed that his desire for complete control over his victims is what drove him to commit the murders and acts of cannibalism. In 1994, Dahmer was beaten to death by a fellow inmate, but his horrifying legacy lives on. 3. Jack the Ripper, the Whitechapel Mystery. Jack the Ripper is one of the most iconic and mysterious serial killers in history. His crimes took place in 1888 in the dark, overcrowded streets of Whitechapel, a poor area of London. Jack brutally murdered at least 5 women, all prostitutes, slashing their throats and mutilating their bodies. The precision of his cuts led many to believe he had medical knowledge, but to this day, his identity remains a mystery. The Ripper taunted authorities in a way that few killers have. Not only did he evade capture multiple times, but he also sent letters to the police, mocking their efforts to find him, signing them as Jack the Ripper. The most chilling detail? One of the letters included half a human kidney, allegedly taken from one of his victims. The hunt for Jack the Ripper became one of the first major police investigations to capture international attention, and the fact that he was never caught only fueled public fascination. Theories about his true identity range from doctors to members of the British royal family. Jack the Ripper's story is shrouded in mystery, and it's this lack of answers that has kept him one of the most famous serial killers of all time. 4. John Wayne Gacy, the Killer Clown. John Wayne Gacy is one of the most terrifying serial killers in U.S. history, not just because of the number of victims, but because of how well he hid his monstrous side. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy murdered at least 33 young boys in Chicago. Most of his victims were teenage boys whom he lured with promises of work or money. What makes Gacy even more chilling is that he used to dress as a clown to entertain at children's parties, hiding the true monster he was behind a cheerful persona. Gacy kidnapped, tortured, and strangled his victims, and the most shocking part is that he buried their bodies under his own house. Investigators later found the remains of 26 boys in Gacy's basement. Other bodies were found dumped in nearby rivers. The cold way in which Gacy maintained a respectable public life while committing these atrocities shocked the nation. He was arrested in 1978, and during his trial, Gacy showed little remorse, claiming that alter egos were responsible for the killings. He was sentenced to death and executed by lethal injection in 1994. The figure of Gacy, the Killer Clown, still haunts popular culture, inspiring countless horror stories. 5. Ed Gein, the real-life horror movie villain. Last but certainly not least is Ed Gein, a name that might sound familiar to horror movie fans. Gein wasn't a prolific killer. He confessed to only 2 murders, but the bizarre nature of his crimes made him an iconic figure, inspiring some of the most terrifying fictional characters, like Norman Bates from Psycho and Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Gein grew up on an isolated farm in Wisconsin under the oppressive influence of his fanatically religious mother. After her death, Gein began robbing graves, using the skin and bones of corpses to make furniture and clothing. He also confessed to killing 2 women, but when police raided his home, they discovered what can only be described as a house of horrors. Skulls used as bowls, chairs upholstered with human skin, masks made from human faces, and more. Gein had been attempting to create a soup of human skin to become his deceased mother. Gein was arrested in 1957 after the body of one of his victims, Bernice Wardens, was found hanging in his barn, mutilated in a grotesque manner. He later admitted to killing her and another woman, Mary Hogan, though many believe his gruesome activities may have extended beyond those 2 crimes. The cultural impact of Ed Gein's case is undeniable. His story inspired numerous horror characters, from Norman Bates and his obsession with his mother in Psycho, to Leatherface and his human skin masks in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and even Buffalo Bill from the Silence of the Lambs. Gein was initially deemed mentally unfit to stand trial and spent the rest of his days in a mental institution, dying in 1984. Even after his death, Gein remains one of the most terrifying figures in criminal history and a major influence on the horror genre. These 5 serial killers aren't just criminals. They're symbols of horror, whose actions challenge our understanding of the human mind. They make us question just how far someone will go to satisfy their darkest desires. Their stories remind us that evil can be hidden behind friendly faces or in people who seem completely ordinary. And that's the scariest part. You may never know what someone is truly capable of until it's too late. If you want to dive deeper into more cases that shook the world and explore the minds of these disturbed individuals, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future videos. Until then, stay safe and stay alert. Evil could be closer than you think.